Good morning, everybody. This is What Does the Bible Say? This is our live morning school broadcast, What Does the Bible Say School. And we're going through our Old Testament, doing a study of the kings of Israel. And we're basically at the point of our study. I've said this before, and I'm not talking about just sectarian people. I'm talking about members of the body of Christ do not know their Old Testament that well. And if you're someone who says, I'm trying to do a good job with my Old Testament study, that is good for you. You're the beneficiary first of doing that type of study, and hopefully you get to edify other people. But by and large, the characters, the men that we're going to be looking at, people don't know them. And so this morning as I get ready, we're going to have discussion about Solomon. That really ought to say Rehoboam, but we're going to have to paint Solomon a little bit more in the way that he was at his end so that we can make a case for Rehoboam. Now, some people who do have an idea who Rehoboam is, and it's Solomon's son who takes over the throne, you're going to hear me say, you say, Caleb, make a case for Rehoboam, and you say it kind of sounds like you're going to do what you've done in the past where you make it appear that he's not that bad of a guy. That is exactly what I'm going to do. And you know why you ought to be happy that I do that? Is because I'm probably going to do that for you. When I hear people talking about you, I would like for you to be able to say, probably Caleb is going to be able to make a case for me. I tell you, sometimes I may not be able to. And even as I go through these king studies, right and wrong is right and wrong. So I might have to be finding myself say, look, the choice you made, that was a bad choice. But I can understand how you got there. It's still the wrong thing, and next time we would like to do better. And that's the idea. I can make a case for these people and still say something is wrong. And so in a local congregation, I had a gentleman, we were presented with a problem, an obstacle, a decision. But anyways, somebody said, well, we did this before. We have to do it again. We have to do it again. And I said, that makes no sense. We made a bad call in the past. We're going to make a bad call again now that we know it's a bad call. That's bad. That's bad reasoning. It makes no sense. So I can have those conversations with you and anybody where we sit down and we be honest and we say that was a bad decision. We might have to say that was an unscriptural decision. And then someone says, well, can you see how I got there? And let me say this too about that. Yeah, I can see how you got there. That's not going to change the outcome of the decision. The whole idea that we're doing here is how to avoid it next time. We're going to study these characters and say, how can we learn from them so that we don't just recreate the same mess all over again? So, now some people might be watching this and say, I don't even know who Rehoboam is. Well, he is basically marked as a very bad person in the Old Testament, and so I'm going to come in here this morning and I'm going to make a case for him, and I'm going to say he participated in a mess, but I still say I give him room. And what that really means is I'm trying to be gracious to him. And if someone says, I don't know about that, that translates to more times than not, I'm going to want to try to be gracious with you. And you like that. People always like to receive the graciousness, but what it's also going to look like is I might actually find myself trying to be gracious with somebody who you are saying, no, they don't need grace right now. They need to really get it hard. I don't know that I'm going to be that way. So this is our contact, 276-806-3641. My email is calebgrobertson@gmail.com, and if you email me, we will put you on the informer list. Page and a half Bible article every Sunday morning. Get it in your email at about 7 in the morning. Alexander Campbell and American Slavery in the 1800s. We're doing a study of Christians in history and how they dealt with that hardship. And there were people back then who were really trying, years before the Civil War, they were really trying to overcome it. We're broadcasting live right now on YouTube. We say, tell your cousin Ted in Wisconsin, and What Does the Bible Say is on YouTube. And so I am going to be making some points in this class this morning, and I'm only going an hour for YouTube instead of the normal 2 hours. So, I'm just saying, yesterday, I worked over 12 hours, and when I got home, and I got home with my pregnant wife and we're going to be having dinner, my phone starts blowing up. And so I tell you that to basically say it can get difficult and it can get stressful. And so when we say, tell people about what does the Bible say, and someone says, look, I know these guys, and they just want to get views. I have said in the past, more views means more interaction with my phone, which means more of my time. And I did it, questions on the Holy Spirit, and I had to basically, it's a brother, and I had to tell him, I don't see the point in arguing with somebody who is a member, like he's arguing with another member of the church. I said, another member of the church who's not even in your area. And I said, you should be using my brain to help evangelism in your local area, because that stuff is not even touching you. So when I say let people know about what does the Bible say on YouTube, it is us, let us help you help other people. We are trying to build Christian character. We are trying to teach people, lost people, about the truth, salvation in the one church. And so you can get all these different resources on YouTube. Johnny Robertson YouTube, What Does the Bible Say, the playlists, and debate videos and what have you. And then if you're local, this was in the newspaper yesterday, and it has scriptures in it. It basically talks about our freedom of speech. You can't preach the gospel here without the freedom of speech. And I think we're scheduled to have another article come out in Saturday's newspaper for the Henry County Enterprise. So we're doing all this because we really do care about individuals, people. I care about the person. And I want people to be encouraged. I want them to feel like, if nothing else, we're making incremental headway. We're trying to hold a line here. We're trying to make a solid, good defense. And so if you want to be a part of that type of a movement, this is where you want to be. And we want to help you. Now, here's what we talked about last time. Last time I said this, I really believe it. I think if you don't do this, your Old Testament study will be very, very lacking. Lives of Old Testament saints have to be funneled through the book of Romans. If they don't have Romans-style grace, then none of these kings are going to make it to heaven. Now, you might say, okay, it's a possible thing that none of these kings are going to make it to heaven. I can't look at these people who do, in fact, have good moments, and then some of them get brought up in the New Testament in a favorable way and just say, well, I just don't have too much confidence. And then I say, if that's how you're treating them, probably the majority of the folk, and I'm saying majority of the Christians that you don't feel confident for them either. What I'm saying as we do our study, grace and mercy and faith are in the Bible, and they have to mean something. And in order for God to be described as a gracious and a loving God, then we have to take these ideas of grace and mercy seriously. We said this about Solomon beyond his strange wives. We asked the question, did Solomon mistreat Hiram, the king of Tyre, and did Solomon reign too long? Because in 1Kings 11 it says, when he was old, he allowed his strange wives to turn his heart away. But I said this about 1Kings 8 for Solomon. In all the things that he did do, he had good moments, and one of the things that he actually said about himself and the people in 1Kings chapter 8 was he said to God, please forgive us when we do in fact inevitably do wrong. He said, there is no man who can be perfect. He said that in 1Kings 8, and then he talked about every man knowing the plague of his own heart. 1Kings 8 is a very, very insightful chapter. And so, when I see those moments of Solomon, I can't act like those things don't exist. Those moments didn't exist when I start seeing him behave poorly. And then someone says, well, Caleb, if you knew he behaved poorly, then you ought to be confident in where he's going to be. I'm not the judge. And I have to say that not every moment of Solomon's life is documented in the text. So, I do think that it's a better idea for us to all get out of that mindset of like you have to be the deciding factor. I can openly teach the truth. But this business where y'all want my stamp of who's going to hell, I just don't really feel like playing that game anymore. And I think you do that. That's just the road to Galatians 5:15. of biting and devouring each other in local congregations. So, you say, well, Caleb, you say all that, but then you have this heading. Look, like I said, I can say right and wrong. I can try to be gracious while saying right and wrong. I'm telling you the truth right now. Do not underestimate an idiot. Now, for people who have studied Rehoboam, he gets some good advice, right? In 1 Kings chapter 12, Rehoboam is the son of Solomon. He begins his reign and he gets some good advice and he just ignores it. He goes with these, basically, if you wanted to call them possible yes men. A lot of people surround themselves, preachers surround themselves with yes men. And he listens to the yes man and they just tell him what he wants to hear, and he does it, and he makes a mess. And so I say, don't underestimate an idiot. What does that mean? You know, Rehoboam is just thrown into it, thrown into leadership, and Proverbs 25:19 says, confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. You got something that needs, like a task, needs to be dealt with, and it needs a delicate touch. You need to take that seriously. And I can't think of a task that requires more, delicacy, an astute eye than working with people's souls. And so you're going to find this when we come back and do part number 2. The idea is you don't necessarily want to pattern yourself after Rehoboam. We are going to see that this is bad stuff. I'm going to make a case for him. But you don't want to pattern yourself after him. And so you find sometimes people, they just want to tell somebody off. And really one of the distinguishing factors is, if you say, if I give me 30 minutes with them, I tell those people the truth. And very potentially you could just shatter their world. Let's say that you told them in 30 minutes every bit of the truth and they took it in and they're just like, well, now I don't even know what to do with myself. And you say, well, I bet you'll figure it out. Are you going to really try to help them piece everything back together? Or are you basically just here to shake people up and then drop them off? Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. You might have a problem that needs dealing with, and you basically throw an unqualified person into it. Now you got 2 problems because he made it worse, and then you're going to have to deal with him. Proverbs 22:3, you basically ask the question, someone says, well, that's a hard term. Well, I got it on the board and I can't do anything about it now. Who is an idiot? A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Somebody might say, well, I have a hard time making predictions about what could possibly happen and could be outcomes, possible outcomes. A lot of people don't care. They don't even try. Prudent is the idea of foreseeing what could happen. And we're not talking about predictions. We're not talking about prophesying. It is being a student of operating with people. It's being a student of the past, of history. So you can say, well, they did this and this was an outcome. It's very possible this could happen again. And so here's what I say about who is an idiot. I read a book about virtue and good, solid good character traits. And one of the things they said about diligence was lack of diligence is a conscious decision. You make a choice. People make a choice to be mentally lazy. And can I say this? Members of the church do make a conscious choice to not care. In congregations, you'll have like a pocket of people and they're wearing themselves out trying to get things done. And we call it kingdom work. And then you have a handful of other people who just sit by and they decided to be that way. It's not a thing of, it just happened and whatever. No, they made a series of decisions. And so if you don't like me saying it this way, this is basically how the other book said it. And so you can take it up with that person. But they said the lack of diligence, which then leads to not being a prudent person, that's an idiot, because they chose to do it to themselves. But not only to themselves, now they are a person that we cannot rely on. And so when you look at 1 Kings 12 and you say, boy, this is a mess, I tell you, that's what an unqualified person can do. And so another thing too is, some people get in over their heads, and that's these folk who, there are people out there, they want to challenge somebody. I had a guy in school that I went to school with, he was just like this. don't go off arguing with people that on stuff that you don't actually have a position formed on. Like, you're just out here trying to stir their pot, and you don't know which way you're going to come down, but then you say, well, I can go ask Caleb about it. And I had someone do that recently, and I told them, just like I told my classmate, I am not doing this with you. You kick that beehive, you're about to get stung. And I know the answer, but you're about to take your lumps for starting stuff like that. That's not prudent, right? Wouldn't be prudent. And then also, it is a general lack of diligence. You didn't get yourself prepared ahead of time. You also did not see ahead of how these things were going to go out. And so someone might say that's 1 Kings 12 and that's Rehoboam. It might be, but we're going to look at some things and I'm going to build a case for him. Now, I want to say this. To Rehoboam's credit, he was young. And this is something that I would like to talk about with you. In 1 Kings 12, number 10, and I know like I'm like skipping over some information, and I'm basically hoping that people who are serious students with this class, you've already been reading the book of Kings and Chronicles, so you have a general idea of what's going on. Rehoboam takes the throne, and the people say, your father worked us too hard. He put a yoke on us, and we'd like things to be lighter around here. And he asked the old men, and the old men said, listen to the people. He asked the young men that he was grown up with, and they said, no, you need to be even harder on the people. And so Rehoboam does that. He's even harder on the people. And then the kingdom splits. Now, if those folk that he grew up with are called young, then he's young, right? The young men that were growing up with him spake unto him, 1 Kings 12:10. Well, when you get over to 1 Kings 14:21, he's called a young man when he begins to rule on the throne. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of the tribe of Israel. So in the Bible, you have old men in 1 Kings 12, but the people who are in their 40s are not called old men. They're called the young men. And so when the Bible says 41 is young, this is what I say to people who are watching. You are in your 40s. You have a lot of gas in your tank. So my dad was in his 50s, I guess, 10 years ago. I was 17 when he got colon cancer. And so he has colon cancer. They operate on him. Now he's out of like the colon cancer stage. But basically he's tired, hard to get his energy back, and he talked with some other people who were older than him, and he asked how they felt in their 50s, and they said, 50s I was in my prime. And he also had a handful of hernia surgeries. And so other people were saying 50s I was in my prime, and 50s he found himself to be somewhat tired, quite tired. But this is what I'm saying to you. If you're a relatively healthy person and you're in your 40s, you haven't even gotten to your prime yet. And there's a bunch of people who are in their 40s and they're saying, man, if I could have gotten an earlier start being a serious Bible student, I'd be so much further ahead than I am right now. Well, you're getting started when you're getting started, so you might as well give it your all. And I do believe that you can grow exponentially once you start. It's just like I'm saying compound interest. You get started and it starts building up, and then it starts building on top of itself. That is how your Bible study will work. You just have to be serious about it. I have to say this too. There are some people who think that they want to work with people, that if you're going to be trying to reach lost people, you've got to work with people. And they say, I want to help people, but I don't like to read. That ain't going to work. I'm telling you, you're in your 40s, and you got gas in your tank, you got a lot of gas in your tank, you are going to have to be a serious student. Now, there are ways around that. Someone might say, Caleb, between me and you, I am not the best reader. Well, I think that you could listen to good quality sermons. You'd be picking up the information that way. There are ways to listen to an audio Bible. A lot of people they do read well, but they just find themselves listening to audio books. You need to find what works for you. And for all of us, the thing that does not work for any of us is making excuses. Now, I'm here today telling you I do have confidence in you. Did you know this was there, Lamentations 3:27? It's good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Well, we're finding out 41 is still called youth in the Old Testament text. I recognize this. And I would just hope you might say, Caleb, I don't think that you're being fair. Well, don't be unfair with me. I can't help who I was born to. Somebody says, Caleb, we didn't all get to be raised by Johnny Robertson and be raised in the atmosphere that you were raised in and have that basic style of education. I recognize that. But you got to do what you got to do, and you got to make do with what you got. And I believe that you can do it. So I would hope that nobody hears me like saying this stuff and say, well, it's easy for him to say that. I genuinely believe that you have the potential and the capability to do these things. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, look, you're not going to see, like in your Bible study, you're not going to see it overnight. Like memorization skills. It's not going to happen overnight, and everybody wants to know all 66 books overnight. It does not work that way. And so my encouragement to you is, look, don't even get 3, 4, 5 years into your study and start getting frustrated. If you're going to be a Christian, you know it's a lifetime thing. So why wouldn't you just go ahead and say, it's probably going to take me a lifetime to study this Bible? Miss Deborah, you can go ahead. I don't mind at all. I tell people I'm in a classroom, right? I got Miss Deborah Buchanan in the studio, and I'm probably embarrassing her now. But if she needs to walk by, she needs to walk by. That's just how it is. So it's not a problem at all. We're in a classroom. You're going to have a lifetime of Bible study, and that means you're going to have to give yourself time. I'm giving you time. But let's not do this, though. Someone says, well, you know, Caleb said, I've got plenty of time. Well, don't just coast, right? I'm talking about really put your all into it. And that's the way that you protect yourself. And someone says, well, some things life is just going to throw at you. Yeah, but if you don't really know the Bible, you're not going to then know how to properly respond, and then you start making hasty decisions, and those aren't good. So you do it to protect yourself. You do it so that you can give good, godly, solid advice to other people if they are inclined to ask you. But don't have this defeatist attitude. And then sometimes you hear me and I get in here and I wear some folk out. Even those people, I want them to do well. I want them to do a good job. And I believe that you can do a good job. The glory of young men is their strength. The beauty of old men is the gray head. You're in your 40s, you've got plenty of strength, energy, mental energy. You can do it. And I'll come back in just a little bit and talk about this. You got gas in the tank. 1 Timothy 4:12. You know, I would hope this gives a new idea to people. Seeing that Rehoboam is called 40 years old, 41 years old, and he's called a young man. And then you get over to the New Testament, Paul says, let no man despise your youth. And 41 is in the young category. And I would say some of y'all are out here knocking 20-year-olds, and y'all are still in the youth category yourself. You know, my big thing these days is people recognizing that they don't know nearly as much as they think they do. And so everybody sees that in 20-year-olds, and I'm 28. And so everybody sees that in the 20-year-olds, but you know, 20-year-olds see that in 40-year-olds. I talk with some people and I know they don't know half of what they're talking about. And then someone says, well, they got more life experience. They got a lot of bad life experience. And I get that. Like someone says, now they know what to tell people not to do. But even still, some people out there making bad choices, still making bad choices, and they're acting like they're making good choices, and they want to tell you about it. I'm just saying, y'all, some folk need to be taking it easier on other people, and I'm not saying we don't tell the truth and we don't say what's right and wrong and we don't call out bad decisions. But as we look through this text, I am saying to take it easy on each other. And that's why I'm going to be making a case for Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. You got gas in your tank. And I want to say some more about this. As you're doing your work, I would say be careful as you set out goals for yourself. You're a young man. You want to do kingdom work. And I have to say, we need to be having real conversations with ourselves about whether or not we want to do kingdom work or do we want to hear good job. And some of y'all have heard me say that I don't even like the term good job. Good job is what people can say when they weren't even paying attention. But they know they got to walk past whoever did the speaking. They got to walk by him to get out the door, and so they just like, good job. Do you want to hear good job, or do you actually want to do the job? In 1Kings 9:10, when they built the temple and then they built the king's house, they did all this building, and other nations were helping out with the process. That was a 20-year process. 1Kings 9:10, this is a note about Solomon. It took 20 years to do all that. And so you get it built in chapter 9, and by chapter 11, everything is falling apart. And so that's why I say be careful with your goals. The goal, if this makes sense, the goal is to save lost people. The goal is not to build up some type of an empire, and someone says, well, of course it's not an empire. Do you know what? Brethren don't call it an empire, they call it a ministry. We've been doing this ministry, and they put a title on it, and then they got to fight about it, and it's about preserving the ministry. I just don't buy that. And my dad has said that this broadcast, it just was something to say when you answered the phone line. What does the Bible say? But it's not legacy, and it's not a ministry. It is helping people. And someone says, he kind of seems to really be emphasizing that this morning, because I'm finding that that's the thing that people don't want to do. And I think that that's why a lot of brethren don't evangelize, is because when you start bringing in new people, you bring in new problems, which means they're going to have to be helped with those problems. And then folks say, I don't care about their problems. Got my own problems. Everybody does. And that's why I'd say it's going to be hard working with people while you're also on the sideline trying to build up your particular. Kelly Lawson in Dallas, Texas, he said, talking about preachers, he said preachers have a tendency to build up a ministry that reflects what they think they deserve. So these big buildings and, all these different things that they do, and everything is plush and opulent and excessive. More times than not, it's that one man feeling as if, he's Bill Clinton and he's got to have it the way he wants and everything's got to be nice, rather than just saying, look, I'm out here hacking it out with the brethren so that we can plant and water, and that is your job. Your job is to plant and water. We don't really need to hear about this stuff about, that type of planting and watering doesn't work. Well, you better have something to replace it with. And it better be good while you're talking about this one don't work. Well, what if yours don't work? Well, that's the way I like it. And it don't work and I like it. Your job is just to plant and water. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, working with these people, and I'm saying their problems, and it takes knowing biblical truth to help out these problems. You're going to have to really label what sinful activity is so that we don't just be creating more problems. And you're going to have to know Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, Christian attributes, so that we know how to then interact with these ungodly folk that we find ourselves interacting with. Do you get what I'm saying? There are people out there and and everybody knows that it would be a nice idea. But I think it hurt Israel. We just spent the last 20 years building this place up. Now the whole kingdom is being split in two. 10 to 12. 12 tribes, 10 in the north, 2 in the south. And we spent the last 20 years building this building. And that absolutely is how the New Testament church works. They spend all that time on a building, have a split, end up selling the building. Pentecostals got your building. See what I'm saying? You ought to just say, if this is what I say. If this is as good as it gets, that'd be fine. If it gets any better, we thank God. I would encourage you to do more evangelism and try to genuinely enjoy the people that you are doing evangelism with. And I got to say this, for members of the church, I wish you'd stop bad-mouthing the people who are not interested and really appreciate the people who are. That's what I think about Super Bowl Sunday. These folk who are super in-depth about Super Bowl Sunday don't care that you are upset that they don't care about religion. Do you get what I'm saying? For the people who came to Bible study on Super Bowl Sunday, enjoy them. And if you got people who are missing worship for Super Bowl Sunday, it's a bigger problem. Do you get what I'm saying? You're talking about, well, the football game lasts however long. You shouldn't have a problem sitting through an hour-long service. They got a bigger problem than football. That's Matthew 16:23. They don't savor the spiritual things. So I'm saying the people who savor together enjoy each other and help these lost people who don't even know the truth. There's a good quote out there. Jimmy Lovell said it. He said, one person deserves to hear the gospel for the first time more than any human being deserves to hear it twice. And we waste a lot of our time on already saved folk instead of trying to reach out to people who've never heard a clear, concise case for the gospel. That ought to be your goal. 20 years building in the making. Be careful when you set your goals. And I'm saying you also don't have to see destruction. You don't have to see turmoil coming. So I want to say this, and I'm just going to let y'all know I'm having a bad day. And I don't want anybody to watch the program and be like, well, what's the rest of this going to be? I want you to know, as I tell you, got gas in your tank. And to please be careful as you set goals, that we have proper goals. It is not easy. But what can you do? And I think a lot of people, and this is what somebody would say, they would say, well, Caleb, we watch you and your dad and you guys make it look easy. It's not easy. And anybody who's presenting the idea to you that it's easy, maybe they're not actually doing the job they present as if they do. And if they're just flat out telling you, oh, this is easy, they're lying to you. And it's hard because you basically do this. 2 Timothy 2:25. It's very difficult when you love people, it's difficult to see them wrestling with themselves. And so you see that all over the place. And then somebody says, well, Caleb, maybe your problem is that you're like spending too much time watching those people. And maybe you're right, but that doesn't mean that I'm not looking at myself. He says, brethren, if any may be overtaken in a fault, you are to spiritual restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Please don't act as if I don't realize I have my own problems that I'm monitoring, that I'm working at. But then I do have to basically find myself in what is a joint collective effort. And sometimes you notice these people aren't paying as much attention as maybe they used to. It's difficult. And you're going to have that. And I will say this too. You're going to say, Caleb, I understand what you're saying. And then you're going to say, but at the same time, I don't have a dad like you do. And this is where I say, what does that mean? Because he's not going to be here forever. So at some point I am going to be fully in your boat. But I would say that if we allow ourselves to make an excuse to stop evangelizing, then we are running the risk of not finding somebody and teaching them the truth who then is going to be a great encouragement to us. I have no clue who is out there. And there are people in my life right now that I had no clue that they were basically coming to be a part of my life 4 or 5 years ago. So, this is our life. If you're a Christian, this is your life. You're trying. Things get frustrating. You don't always know how things are going to pan out. What are you going to do? This is your life. And you look at 1 Peter 5:9, it is the best life choice. Somebody says, well, you're not making it sound like that. I said I'm having a bad day. I didn't say I'm having like a bad life. I'm having a bad day. And it's going to look like that. But there are people out there having a bad day, and they're having a bad week and a bad month. So when you're doing this, y'all, can I talk about your goals again? The goal, Jesus came and He did good, and He had compassion on the people. And I think, honestly, you start having some bad goals, improper goals, you do not have to be able to see where your destruction is going to come from. And so we all know it, that a lot of people get misused in the name of religion. Does that make sense? Pastors, one-man pastor system out here, people abusing folk just in all kinds of ways. And you can say, well, I'm not that bad. Well, no one ever thinks they are that bad. right? You can always find somebody who's worse than you, and so you say, well, at least I'm not doing that. But I think self-serving people have a tendency of getting taken out of the way. And then rightfully so, I'm saying if we're talking about the cause. Self-serving people have a tendency to be taken out of the way. And you don't have to say like, oh, if I go, this is probably it. And I'm going to say, if I go, it doesn't have to be that you die. You can just be rendered useless and ineffective. And it doesn't have to make sense. So in 1Kings 11, I'm talking to you about just big picture stuff here. And someone might say, well, I don't know what exactly we're working at here. I'm just saying big picture stuff as far as being a Christian. You have bad days, you're working, and if you're not keeping a single eye, he said, let your eye be single, and that singleness has to be the kingdom, and that's the idea, is teaching the gospel to lost people. Well, Solomon loses his single eye, and he becomes very, very distracted. He's got these strange wives, they turn his heart away. But now, this is why I say, you don't have to, in your self-serving goals. So let's change it, okay? Let's say it this way. You know that you're not nearly as involved in the kingdom as you ought to be, and you know exactly why. You are basically a slave to your job because you want to make X amount of dollars, because you want to provide a certain lifestyle. So you know that you're not involved. Well, then you basically start doing this number. You start rationalizing with yourself. You say, well, I don't work in God's kingdom right now as I ought to because I'm trying to make a monetary cushion for myself years from now. Yeah, years from now, then you're going to say, I worked so hard getting here that I just want to rest in my retirement. And so in those moments, I do think that there are some people that God allows to be wealthy. Like, there are wicked people out there and they're wealthy. But I think that there are some people that providentially, they have wealth and it's from God. But if they're not going to be a 1 Timothy chapter 5 or 1 Timothy chapter 6 person, charge them, he says in 1 Timothy 6:17, charge them that are rich in this world that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, which giveth us richly all, that they do good, they be rich in good works, they be ready to distribute and willing to communicate. I think that wealthy Christians who are actually not generous, giving Christians, I think that God can take that money and give it to somebody else who will be generous. And we all know there are some people that if they had money, they wouldn't have good sense with it. So that's why I say I do think that God is in some of those details. And that's why I say He might potentially want to use somebody who says, I got a good job and I'm working hard and I'm making excess dollars. Well, things can change, and they can change overnight. And it can be things where you say, no. What I do, that's the gold standard of that whole industry, and it will never go away. That stuff is all over the place. My dad can tell you a story from the late 80s. I don't know what this is, but basically there was some type of Texas company, and my mother's mother was always saying to my dad, you could get a job there and you'd have job security and you'd have financial stability. And, a lot of that had to do with basically the general idea was to talk my dad out of doing evangelism full time. And that company had like a train car go by and someone had graffitied some type of racial slur on it. It got put on the news and the company tanked. They can't even do anything about the fact that somebody graffitied their train car, but that's how news works, and that's how people are. They punish the company for what somebody else tagged on their train car, and shortly thereafter they went under. And so people talk about job security. Job security is a myth in whatever field that you're in. And you say, no, you don't have to see it coming. The Lord stirred an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was the king's seed in Edom. For it came to pass when David was in Edom, and Joab the captain of the host was gone up to bury the slain, after he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months did Joab remain there with all Israel until he had cut off every male. And this, I think we said this before, this is just a small moment out of 2 Samuel 8. For the 6 months Joab stayed, and Hadad fled, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him to go into Egypt, Hadad being yet a little child. And they arose out of Midian and came to Paran, and they took men and with them out of Paran, and they came to Egypt unto Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, which gave him a house and appointed him victuals and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him to wife the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphanes the queen. So, you basically say, no, the lifestyle I have made for myself, it's not going to go away. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm fixed in. I'm solid. And not only is it the case that Solomon has no idea that Hadad the Edomite even exists, he's under the illusion that all the Edomites were put down, the king's seed were put down by Joab, who was the captain of his father's host. He doesn't even know this person exists. And not only does he not know that Hadad exists and who he is, now Hadad is building an affinity, building a league and a confederacy with what would be Solomon's father-in-law. Right? Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him to wife the sister of his own wife. He is tied in, like if Solomon said, hey, I am in tight with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Somebody says, Hadad in just as tight as you are. He married in that family just like you did. And we have down here in the bottom, very, very small. Do you know all of your friends' friends? And you might say, I'm counting on them. They'd go up to bat for me. And all the while, your friend has other friends in their ear talking trash about you. And you basically say, oh, no, I'm fixed in. Nothing's going to happen to me. And that is a New Testament principle. The man built up his barns and he said, I've got so much stuff and now I've outgrown my barns. What will I do? And he just says, I'm going to go build more barns. And then in that night, he lost his life. And that's the idea. We are so busy with our day-to-day schedule of our consumerism for ourselves, self-serving consumerism. We just don't see the end in sight, and you don't have to. And that's what application ought to be taken out of 1Kings 11. You don't have to see it, and it's not just Hadad, it's Rezin in Syria. Rezin up north. He gathered men unto him, became captain over a band when David slew them at Zobah. And they went to Damascus and dwelt therein and reigned in Damascus. And he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon. Beside the mischief that Hadad did, he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. So, this just happens again. This is out of 2 Samuel 8. These people just pop up out of nowhere, and you didn't even know it was coming. And then someone says, well, if I had known, I would have acted differently. Well, the idea, if you're admitting I would have acted differently, the idea is to just do the right thing without the idea that hardship is even coming. Do the right thing because it's the right thing. Now, let me have a moment. Does that make sense? This is a moment of application with your text. Somebody says, I don't know what to do with 1Kings 11 or 1Kings 12. Well, one thing you could do with 1Kings 11 is notice you do not have to have an idea of, there's trouble brewing on the horizon. You might just think that everything is fine and dandy, and you are basically can't see another horizon, and it's coming for you. And so, what's the purpose? The purpose is to always be trying to stay close to God. And I think that God is concerned about His people who are concerned about His other people. Do you know what I mean? It's like, at some point we're basically saying, God's looking at me and God is looking to send people to help me. Well, what if God is actually looking at you so that you can help somebody else that He's looking at? I think the best course of life is to basically look at how Jesus was doing it and He cared about these people. And if someone says, well, no, duh, the idea is to be like Jesus. Well, we say that, but we don't do it. In our aspirations, we don't have to see where the destruction is coming from. But I would say this, this is another one. The enemy, right? Rezin in Syria and Hadad in Edom. Syria is up north of Israel and Edom is down southeast of Israel. You don't have to have an enemy. You could just get sick and die. That's 2 Chronicles 16:12. Asa had a very bad disease of his feet. And 2 Chronicles 21:18, Jehoram, after all this, the Lord smote him and in his bowels with an incurable disease. It doesn't have to be like utter, catastrophe. You could just get sick unexpectedly. This is where I have another moment with everybody. I got sick unexpectedly. You know, like I said, I was going to the bathroom. Every time I went to the bathroom, I'd be passing blood. So, Jonathan, you going to give me a commercial break? Can I get a commercial break? Yeah. Okay. So for people who are watching, I'm going to come right back. We're going to take just like a very, very brief 1 minute, 2 minute commercial, and just whenever he tells me he's ready, I'll go off, come right back. Don't go anywhere. We've got more What Does the Bible Say coming right back in just a minute. You good? Okay. But I have clearly stated here that by the deeds of the law there shall be no flesh justified in his sight, for the law is the knowledge of sin. But, he says in 21, he says, but now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. What is he saying here? He is saying here that we are being saved by grace through faith outside of our ability to always be morally upstanding. And it's not the case, as some people would say, well, in the New Testament God is gracious, and in the Old Testament He was very harsh and judgmental, because look at what He says. It's now manifested. It doesn't mean that it did not exist before. We're now beginning to see it clearly. He says it is now manifested, and he says, and it is being proven by the Old Testament. Some people are not going to like this class, but this is what I'm going to say. People in 2022 may not like it, but you take an Old Testament Jew like Jonah, and he would probably be saying, this dude is hitting it on the head. Jonah is upset, but he says this. When he finds out that the people of Nineveh repented, this is Jonah's statement. He prayed to the Lord and he said, I pray thee, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in my country? Therefore I fled unto Tarshish, for I knew thou art a gracious God, and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repentest thee of the evil. Jonah flat out says, I knew he'd forgive these people. Now, somebody's going to say, and I agree, Jonah chapter 3, they repented. I agree that they repented. But y'all, we have to recognize this. Saying, and that is the idea of saying, I did the crime. And then someone says, well, I repented. You're expecting to not do the time. I'm saying that God can look at these people, and another idea that we have to wrap our head around is that God judges a lifetime. And you and I, we look at these incremental moments on their chart, right? You pull out a folder, here's Solomon. Okay, we are back on. Very, very quick. Like we said, we're in the classroom, and sometimes you just got to step out. Okay. You don't have to see where it's coming, and it doesn't have to be a whole nother person. We said you could just get sick and be rendered ineffective. And so, and that's just another part of life. And so my dad has said that when he got sick, what his feeling was. And I think I've told y'all before that when I got sick, I don't know. I'd be fine in one sense if I forgot that day. But then I have said before, in one way, I have appreciated my getting sick because, I did get to experience what it was like just, you don't have enough energy to get out of bed. And so I have said two people before, they talk about workload, and I just say, I have been sick. I'm not going to complain about getting to work. I want to work as hard as I can because I have been in a situation where I did not get to do any work at all. And it was miserable. And so in one way I have said before, I wish that everybody could get sick and then get better so they can experience that and they can appreciate what it's like to get to work. So my brother Ian, he has said that one of the best things that ever happened to him was that he went to jail. And some people need that. And he says that about other people. Some people just need that, whether it's that, a calamity, a sickness. If it's something that helps you get serious and it actually helps you appreciate where you currently are now, that's very beneficial. So you don't have to see these things though, right? And that's what I'm saying, this illusion, it's all an illusion, because at the end of the day, everybody's going to be out of here at some point. But it's like we create these illusions of, well, I can fixate myself and I can build up and it will not be taken away from me. Okay, maybe you don't have an enemy, and maybe you don't have like a famine, right? Because they had famines, other people have famines. You don't have anything like that, but you get sick and it is incurable. It will be awful. And so what I was going to say, you remember a moment ago I said, people say, I want to do the work. And I said, it's not easy and it is frustrating. So when I got sick, that was basically the conversation that I had with myself. And basically, when I have conversation with myself, I am talking to God, because obviously God is hearing it and I know that He's hearing it. And that's not me like saying, how brazen. I'm saying I'm communicating with God. And so I'm on Riverside Drive, and I basically say, I'm doing the work that I'm doing. Why, if someone's getting sick, why am I getting sick? I think sometimes that's just life, and sometimes I think that I personally need those moments. It helped me. It helped me. You don't have to be able to see where your deliverance is coming from either. Now, this is a positive note. I have basically made it all doom and gloom. You don't have to know, but that's for sobriety. That's for being serious. I don't know where calamity is going to come from. But this is where we say have faith. You don't have to be able to see where your deliverance is coming from either. In 2 Chronicles 16:9, if we're going to make the case that some things need to happen to us so that we can get better perspective, like I think that I got, I love to work. I think it helped me with my perspective. Then you can't just look at these situations, and that's what he ends up saying to them. Let's go to 1 Peter. First Peter 4, verse number 12. Think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. New Testament, first century, they're going under heavy persecution, but this is just a process to where their persecutors are then taken out of the way. You have to go through this to get to the particular end goal. And you don't always know what that's going to look like, the means to the end that you would like to have. 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth. If you are somebody who is serious about doing kingdom work, and if you are someone who genuinely has concern for other people, then you can have hard times. But I do not believe that God is going to leave you into this situation where you don't have any sense of relief, which is the discussion of 2 Chronicles 16:9. 2 Chronicles 16:9 is a discussion to Asa where he's saying, God will take care of you. The eyes of Jehovah run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward Him. Then you go to 2 Chronicles 25:9. King Amaziah said to the man of God, what shall we do for the 100 talents which I have given to the army of Israel? And the man of God answered, the Lord is able to give thee much more than this. And you don't know where it's coming from. So, this is how it works. Concerned Christians keep this broadcast going. That's not for me to say that God is not keeping this broadcast going. God keeps this broadcast going, and God uses concerned Christians who watch what does the Bible say and say, these men and the people who work with them behind the scenes are putting out so much Bible material, they have to have funding. And a lot of times we don't know where it's going to come from. And sometimes people would look at a situation and say, it looks like things are getting pretty tight. But then you think about 2 Chronicles 25:9, and I just say, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong in behalf of those whose heart is perfect toward Him. The man of God answered and said, the Lord is able to give thee much more than this. And I will say that it has worked in the past. That some people, they say, I can't work with you anymore. And for whatever reason, more times than not, it ends up being personal. But then other people enter your life, and I say concerned Christians. And they help the cause. You don't have to know where your deliverance is coming from. So let me say this also. This, and that was money. 2 Chronicles 25:9 is money. So let me say this to you also. 2 Chronicles 16:9, God's watching you, those whose heart is perfect toward Him, and He says, God is able to give thee much more than this. I hear a lot of people in the church, they worry about who their child is going to marry. You've heard me say on here before, the best advice for young people is do not marry a non-Christian. My dad, one of the biggest things he said to me when I was growing up is, please don't marry a non-Christian. And so here's my next statement. If you are somebody and you are raising a child to love God and love people, which is Matthew 22:36-39. You love God, you love people. If you're raising your child to be that way, is it not possible that another child of the opposite sex is being raised to be just like that? You just don't know where they are. And all these folk who basically go to unsound congregations, look, young people in the pew who have ungodly parents are just as bad as people in the world. Now someone says, well, they have potential to hear good information. Yeah, and they have potential to ignore every bit of information that comes out of the pulpit and just be worldly. They just happen to be in the same building on Sunday morning. Raise your child to love God and love people. Somewhere else out there, another child of the opposite sex is being raised to love God and love people, and I believe that they can be brought together providentially if they're doing what it says in the text, whose heart is perfect toward Him. I am in Virginia. I married some strange girl from Houston. And I'm talking about stranger to me. I had no clue she existed. She found me based off of a video that was being shared on Facebook because we had a concerned moment and we tried to take action on it. One mutual friend on Facebook, that's it, and then we got married. And y'all know the other part of that story is people were not ready for her to get married right away. And she did it anyway. And now here we are, 6 years later, and I'm saying that could be you. Now, this is where someone says, well, he just made that sound like it's just so easy and everything just falls into place. Look, I had to be what I was going to be, and she had to be what she was going to be in order for me to even take interest, right? Everybody's got to work at who they need to be, and then when you get married, like, yeah, it sounds like everything fell into place. Do I believe providence was involved in that? I do. I thank God. And then you get married and it's work, right? It's work. Seeing your destruction, seeing your deliverance, seeing your whirlwind. This is where we say, did Solomon not see himself? Like you said, Caleb, you said, told us you're going to make a case for Rehoboam. I'm getting there. But before I do it, I have to talk a little bit more about Solomon. Did he not have an idea that this was going to happen? He did all for his strange wives, which burnt incense and they sacrificed unto their gods. We can make an excuse for anything, and we do. If you're going to look at the text and you're going to say about Solomon, did he not see what he was doing? Don't ask that question unless you're about to really sit back and look at yourself for a good while. Can I see in myself what I'm actually trying to hide from myself? And what type of things have I been involved in for so long now that I have been making excuses for them that I don't even remember that I used to feel bad about them? And you can make an excuse for anything. That's Romans 2:15, to the point where, and I said this about Solomon, and I hope that it matters. where he said, I'm not offering to these idols, but my wives are. I'm not doing it, but yeah, I made it possible. I facilitated their desire to go do it. Well, in 1Kings 11, he still gets rebuked for that. Did he not see himself? Well, don't we all see ourselves? We often don't see ourselves, or do we? And then we just make excuses for ourselves. Ephesians 4:22. He says, "Put off concerning the former conversation of the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts." 1 Peter 1:14. Some of our lusts are basically created in ignorance. He says, "As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts in your ignorance." Well, someone says, well, Solomon wasn't ignorant. Well, more times than not, neither are you, and neither am I. And we do it anyway, and then we start excusing it. And that's the bad part. Someone says the bad part is doing it. Romans 7, you can be wrestling with something, and you're not making an excuse for it. I do genuinely think that the worst part is when you start trying to excuse it. So let me have a moment what that really would look like. You come into a congregation, you tell everybody, look, I'm struggling with this, so y'all please be patient with me. I don't want to do it, but I do it. Sometimes I do it, so please be patient with me. That's understandable. And in more times than not, that is the greater majority. Everybody's got something that they're working on. But here is the problem that really, when it starts becoming a problem, if you have something and you're saying, hey y'all, I'm an imperfect fellow, but I'm working on it. Please be patient with me. And everybody says, we can understand that. But then when it just happens to get preached on from the pulpit and you get up and say, well, that's it, and you walk out, well, now you're basically ready to fight about whatever your particular problem is. I thought you were working on it. I thought you actually hated it, because that's what he says in Romans chapter 7. I thought you actually hated that thing. Now that it has been talked about openly, and we're not even saying your name was called, it's just the general topic of this sinful activity got discussed, you got mad and walked out. I think now you're in a problem, because you're not warring with that item anymore. You're now warring with your brethren because they happen to talk about that particular item. Did Solomon not see himself? You know what? We all look at each other and say, don't they see how that looks? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes you just honestly don't. And you know what? I think that's when you have to have friends, David, Nathan, these individuals who will talk to you. That's 2 Timothy 2:25. You are trying to reach out to them who are opposing themselves. And you know what? You do that and you basically say, I'm going to be a good friend to them, and that's basically when you see them not being a good friend back to you. They start attacking you. Well, sometimes that's how life goes. The idea is just to not hold grudges when it's done. And that's Hebrews 3:13. You can be deceived by lust. You can have lusts that are formed out of ignorance, but if you don't watch out, then you're going to become a hardened individual. But exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Did Solomon not see himself? The New Testament says hardened, past feeling, Ephesians, and then seared with a hot iron, 1 Timothy 4. So, I'm not doing this to beat up on Solomon. I'm doing this to talk to you. And you are talking with me. Solomon got a direct statement. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon. Now, does God actually speak out to Solomon? Does Solomon have a prophet that I don't know of come to him? I don't know, but he is informed either way. For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit, I will not rend away all of the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. Now, this is a moment where we're all inhabiting the congregation together. And people do change, and people get distracted, and they start basically caring about the world more than they ought to. And so, the thing that gets me, y'all, I don't understand it. Man, if you're going to be in the building and you're going to flat out say to another Christian, if you think you're telling me something, you got another thing coming. I don't know why you're even there, because you are displaying such a horrible attitude. But that's what people say. And then it turns into, well, I'll hear it, but I'm not going to hear it from them. And then it turns into a whole personal matter. You don't like them. Let me tell you, those style of people that basically can become Solomon, it could be anybody, you would not care if God Himself spoke to you. Don't give me this business about, well, I'll hear it, but I'm not going to hear it from them. You don't care who it's coming from. This isn't a thing of don't shoot the messenger. Because Solomon, in the text, Solomon is told the Lord said, the Lord was angry with Solomon, and said to him, wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon. Solomon gets a direct statement from God. But when you get to 1 Kings 11:40, Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. And Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt unto Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. It's not a thing of, I'm willing to hear it, but I'm not willing to hear it from them, or anything. It is a genuine blanket statement. At this moment, you don't care. You are consumed with yourself while opposing yourself, 2 Timothy 2:25. He got a direct statement, and instead of fixing the situation, he then goes after Jeroboam. Well, fix the situation. No, I will just kill Jeroboam. Now, this is warning for all of us. You look at your text. Who is the wisest person in the Bible? I know someone says Jesus. We're talking about someone who's not Jesus. 1 Kings 3, Solomon gets wisdom from God. 1 Kings 10, Queen of Sheba comes to see Solomon, and she says, the half has not been told. Everybody praises Solomon. This was like, I'm saying, y'all, and then someone's going to say, well, this is rude. Solomon is just a man like you and I are just men. This was a very, very stupid moment. As if God did not choose Jeroboam out of a nation of people. I'll kill Jeroboam. You think that God can't just pick a second Jeroboam? Like God did not just stir up, as it said in chapter 11, verse number 14, God just stirred up Hadad down out of Edom. Had been hanging out in Egypt all this time. You didn't know it. And it's like you look at this in the text and say, man, he should have known. Verse 14, Hadad just pops out of nowhere, and Solomon has to say, I didn't see that coming. Now Rezin's coming down from the north, and he say, I didn't see that coming. But then Jeroboam starts to rise up, and you say, well, I can kill Jeroboam, as if another Jeroboam can't just come up out of nowhere. And this is where I said at the beginning of the class, you start doing stupid stuff, and you end up making a bigger mess for yourself. You don't just have a Jeroboam problem. Jeroboam flees down into Egypt, and now what do you have? If this is not, like it says, Shishak, if Shishak is not Solomon's father-in-law, he's still a relative. He's some in-law. You got your in-laws down in Egypt knowing, now y'all got infighting inside Israel, huh? Egypt knows it. Hadad the Edomite knows it. There's no reason to think that they're not going to tell. What is the saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You think they're not going to tell their friends, your enemy? Man, they got all this problem going down in Israel. They ain't ready for nothing. And we do it to ourselves. And so, I think that I can make a point with a lot of people at this moment where you don't like how this is sounding because it's your personage. I don't want to make like a mess for myself, and I don't want to dig a hole so deep that I can't come out of it. I wish that we would think this way more than anything else. God can forgive you. God will forgive you. People, on the other hand, are less forgiving, and this is what I wish we would think about. He says in 2 Corinthians 6, 2-3, I have heard in the time accepted, and in the day of salvation have I succored thee. Behold, now is the accepted time, now is the day of salvation. Look what he says, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed, but in all things approving ourselves as ministers of God in much patience and in affliction and necessities and in distresses, stripes, imprisonments, tumults, and labors, and watchings and fastings, by pureness, by knowledge, by long-suffering, by kindness, by the Holy Ghost, by love unfeigned, by the word of truth, by the power of God, by the armor of righteousness of the right hand on the left. This is what I would say. We just built this really big case in a bad way against Solomon. And I say, I think I could convince some people maybe to look at themselves, straighten up a bit, on the basis of they don't want to have any personal problems. But what I'm really getting at is I wish that people would say, I don't want to hurt the work of the church. We got a lot of good things going for ourselves. I'd hate to be the one who just throws a monkey wrench into it. Now, I wish that was the personal thinking of a lot of people. And I want to say this to you in the meantime. We got a lot of good things going. We're doing a good work. I think it's a sincere work. If you do happen to be the one who throws a monkey wrench into it, I hope that you just would make it right, but I'm not going to crucify you. And what I mean is, in some instances, y'all, we are in fact just waiting for somebody to be human. I do not play this business where somebody basically informs me of a situation and I go, no, I never thought. I never thought King David would basically commit adultery and then conspire to have a man killed. I never thought that Solomon would be involved in all this idolatry and then hunt a man down all the way to Egypt. I never thought that Judah would fornicate with his own daughter-in-law. Never thought Cain would kill his own brother. And it's like, what in the world are we talking about when you had the audacity to say to somebody, you disappointed me? Who do you think you are? Me! Oh, I'm not one of these people that basically, like someone says, we can't practice self-control. You hear these people say, well, we sin every day. Maybe. But still, Paul said, I buffet my body and bring it into subjection. I just don't see us getting anywhere by me having to say, let me take a moment and tell you, how disgusting I think you are. And that's where I say God will forgive you. It's just the people who won't. But you basically have a commitment from me that I'll try. I want to be gracious to you. And I want you to be gracious to me. Direct statement, still hunted a man down. And someone said, this is reminiscent of King Saul. It is reminiscent of King Saul. And that's where I say at some point you're just waiting for people to be human. Saul just at a moment's notice, everything is good. David just delivered us out of this giant Philistine. Boy, I hate him. Moment's notice, waiting on a person to be human. Instead of ruling the people, and I'm saying ruling them well, as he ought, you're chasing an industrious man down to Egypt. Awful. And this is just a tidbit. Nobody ever questioned Jeroboam going to Egypt. But y'all all want to dig in on David because he went over to Gath, which is a Philistine country. And I made a case for David that he was conspiring against the Philistines while he was with the Philistines. But nobody ever says, Jeroboam, he should have had faith in God instead of going down to Egypt. You don't know what you would have done when the entirety of the king of all of Israel says he's going to have you executed. It's ridiculous. Now, this is where I want to make a case for Rehoboam. You did not know who Rehoboam was when we got started. And you said, Caleb, the way this class went, I don't really know too much more about Rehoboam. Well, we're about to start looking at Rehoboam. And y'all, you're going to find these people as you live your life. And as I live my life, I'm going to see these people. And my thing is, you learn and you study characters in the Bible, and you basically, I think you can be a student of personalities, and you find people who need help, and you find people who can make it without as much help. But you try to help these folk. And so one thing, I said a while ago about Rehoboam, the Bible said he was young. And so what I can't understand is, and I'm not faulting them, it's just basically me saying I needed that, and it helped me with my perspective. But I have said this before, some people, when I was like 20 and 21, they were working me over. And I did not experience too much from them where they were like giving me any room, where they were saying, like, Caleb is a young man and Caleb is going to see this or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I just got handled. And I'm okay, right? Like I'm saying, but it helped me basically, people in their 50s and their 60s working with a 20-year-old, it's like I didn't get any room. And someone might say, well, that's the only way that 20-year-olds stop being 20-year-olds. Maybe. I needed it. But it's in the text. He was a young man. And so when I see, and let me just say this too, I did have some people make vague statements to me and they said, Caleb, one day you'll figure it out. That is stupid and worthless. Those people did not help me at all. One day you mellow out, one day you'll figure it out. Thank you. No, I read material. I'm saying, y'all, you're going to have to read. To be the person you'd like to become, you're going to have to read. To be the person you need to be, you're going to have to read. And so I read material, and it's not like I read about why are 20-year-olds the way they are. I was reading books about God and His children. And in all honesty, Book of Romans material. And that stuff helped me. And it helped me see people. And that is the reason why I get to see Rehoboam the way I see him. And here's my thing, and this is what I'm really getting at. I hope that when I'm like 55, that I never say to a 20-year-old, one day you'll figure it out. Because as I'm a 28-year-old, I'm saying that was just a stupid and worthless thing that they said to me. They didn't actually like sit down and go over this stuff with me and try to rationalize. And that is, let me talk to you real quick about what an elder ought to do. Convince the gainsayer. So I'm here with you today telling you people in books have convinced me about God's grace and seeing people as people that they're going to make. Jesus said it must needs be that offenses come. It's inevitable. So in some senses we're just waiting for humans to be humans. But what I would like to do is when I'm older, I'd like to be an individual who can help a 20-year-old be convinced. You're being too hard on these folk. That's what I'd like. So I'm doing it now, making a case for Rehoboam. Inheriting a situation is not the same thing as creating a situation. And Rehoboam inherited a situation. You want to beat up on somebody in chapter 12, you got to be beating up on Solomon. Someone says, well, I thought you didn't want to beat up on Solomon. Well, I'm going to make a case. God is going to judge these people. And someone doesn't like that. Someone says, well, that's a cop-out, Caleb. Hello? Do you think that I have as much insight as God does? It's not a cop-out for me to say God's going to judge them. But if you're going to beat up on somebody in 1Kings 12, it is not Rehoboam. Because Rehoboam did not start or cause the mess that they found themselves in. Solomon did. Solomon split the kingdom. Rehoboam just happened to be the person that it came into. You have it specifically said in chapter 11. He says, I will not do it now. I'm going to do it when your son is reigning. But it is Solomon's doing. Now, with that in mind, y'all, as I have said before, the church, there are politics inside of the church. There are people that will wind you up to do their bidding. And when things start getting hot, they will dump you. And they will leave every bit of that mess with you. And sometimes someone says, did they know they were doing it? Some people do. This is what I would like to do. Some of these things are very difficult, but I would like, for your sake, to be a person who has enough insight and wisdom to recognize you didn't do that. They wound you up to do that, and they left you with it. We all know about a fall guy. We all know about a scapegoat. Rehoboam is the fall guy. Solomon did this. Now, should I not take this as an honest report? This is the options that we have, and I understand that there are options. Somebody says, well, Rehoboam wasn't paying attention. I have just as much reason to think that he was. And this was his statement about how his father was running the kingdom. The people came in and they said, your father laid a heavy yoke on us. We would like it to be lighter. And Rehoboam, after 3 days, he responds, whereas he says, he says, and now, whereas my father did lay you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. And as my father chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scorpions. Now, someone says, that's just figurative language. Do you not think it's possible that Solomon actually was out here whipping folk? No, you can't. Why not? He's doing everything else. Strange wives, making it possible for them to worship their idols inside of Israel. He finds out about Jeroboam and tries to kill Jeroboam. You're willing to kill an industrious servant of the people. I can't imagine that whipping folk is beyond your purview. I think this is an honest report. I think this is the extent of where Solomon got. He's out here whipping folk. Someone says, well, Solomon's not doing the whipping personally. Yeah, and David didn't kill Uriah. Joab did. He's a part of it. I think it's an honest report. Who split the kingdom and why? So do you see what I'm doing here? I am not trying... I didn't come in here today just to make Solomon awful after I tried to make a case for Solomon 2 weeks ago. By the way, I couldn't do my class last Wednesday because I had every 8 weeks I have to do an infusion for my stomach illness, so I couldn't come in and do a live show. I'm not going to come in here and just start tearing down on Solomon after I made a case for him, but I am also not going to just leave Rehoboam hanging high and dry. And what this translates to is you should say, I think that this is how Caleb is going to treat me. Will he call out my stuff? I will tell you when I disagree with you. That doesn't mean I'm going to eviscerate you. Look, man, I get it. I can see where people are coming from, but I can tell you this, you don't want to keep going that way, right? And that's what I'm talking about. So I'm basically looking at this and I'm trying to have an objective view and say, Rehoboam is not the problem. He's inheriting a problem. He says, my father did lay a heavy yoke on you. The people said that. So here's the thing. We're not going to trust the people and we're not going to trust the son. Your father laid a heavy yoke on you. He said, yes, he did. But it's about to get harder. Things were not going very well with Solomon. Now, I want to take a moment and just have an extended tidbit. In my Bible, and you're going to find a lot of these in your Old Testament study, there's not a text, y'all, that is like, and this is what I've said about how preaching schools teach the book of Romans. The book of Romans is not in your Bible with the purpose of answering Calvinism. Calvinists misuse the book of Romans, but Romans is supposed to mean something to God's children. It is not just a book on how to answer Calvinism. But you will find texts throughout the Bible where it messes up the Calvinistic system. So, in my Bible, my wide margin King James Bible, I encourage you to get a wide margin so you can write these notes down. Half my brain is in this book. I have at the bottom here that 1Kings chapter 12 is actually a very good example of free will. And this is what I mean. In 1 Kings 11:10, you get the clear statement. God is rending the kingdom because of idolatry. And so when you start talking to your Calvinistic neighbors, they're always talking about the sovereignty of God, as if people don't believe in the sovereignty of God. I just don't believe that He's randomly picking people to go to hell and randomly picking some people to get to go to heaven. Obviously, I think God is in charge, but look at how this works in the text. God says, I'm upset about the idolatry, and so I'm going to split the kingdom 10-2. What do the people say? The people come in, and all they said was, we don't like the taxation. The people split that kingdom over taxes, is what happened. When you look at 1 Kings 11:4, and really that should be 12:4, and I can come out of that, because I want you to have the right notes for your notepad. Okay, that's it. Let's go back. In 1 Kings 12:4, when the people come out and they say, your father made a yoke on us that was too heavy. This is a reference to, as 1 Kings 9:15 says, Solomon raised a levy out of the people. Solomon is working this collection of people to where they are gone every third month, and everybody's on a rotation. These collection of people, you're on a rotation. Every third month you're gone to go up to Lebanon. And then you have people who are in the Navy to go participate with the people of Tyre, Hiram, his people, his Navy. They go over towards, across the sea to Edom, southeast area. And in all of this building, you know how a government gets things done. We're building up Milo. We're building up all these other regions that we did last time. And not only are we building up all this stuff, but Solomon lived in such opulence that the people came in and they said, you are taxing us too hard. And the people said, they were fine with Rehoboam. That's another point to Rehoboam's case. These people said, if you will make it lighter, they said, we will serve thee. I'm looking at 1 Kings 12, the end of verse number 4. Here is another point to Rehoboam's credit. These people didn't have a problem with Rehoboam. You make it lighter, we will serve you. And everybody comes to 1 Kings 12 wanting to wear Rehoboam out when these people didn't have a problem with Rehoboam. They had a problem with Solomon. You're taxing us too hard. You're working us too hard. And then more proof that the people split the kingdom over taxation, because in 1 Kings 12:18, look what happens. At this point, the split has happened. The northern tribes said, to your tents, O Israel. They were done. They left. But when the split happened, Rehoboam, he makes a bad move, and he just thought he's going to keep taxing these people. King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones that he died. He still tried to collect taxes out of these people who said, did you not hear us say that we are forming our own government over here? Now, someone says, what does that have to do with free will? God can actually have what He wants accomplished, and it has, in the people's mind, has nothing to do with what God's talking about. They are simply operating on their own particular whims. There is not a discussion in 1 Kings 12 about idolatry. Sure, I'm sure that some of these people were upset about the idolatry, but they don't bring it up now. They bring up the taxation. Free will, y'all. Someone says sovereignty of God. Absolutely, God is the sovereign ruler of the universe, but He does so while operating around our free will that He gave us. How do you know that? Because I see these people working His will while not even considering what He's upset about. That's a small tidbit, but I think it's valuable. And that consistently is, in fact, how things work in the Bible. God's work gets done, and more times than not, they're not even thinking about what does God want. And that's Acts chapter 4. These people crucified Jesus, the determinate counsel of God. Let's go over here, it might be Acts 5. Here it is. Acts 5:28. Acts 4:28, I'm sorry. Acts 4:28 says, "For to do whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before to be done." So it was in God's plan, Jesus is going to die for the people. When they put him on the cross, were they thinking, we're doing God's will? No. They're all saying, we hate this dude. We're about to be done with him. Which was their free will decision. But God's will still gets accomplished. And you get to see that happening in 1 Kings 10, 1 Kings 9, 10, 11, and 12. 1 Kings 9 is where Solomon lays the heavy tribute on the people. 11, he does the false gods. 11, God says, I'm going to rend the kingdom. And then chapter 12, they do rend the kingdom, but it has nothing to do with what God is upset about. And I'm saying that's how sovereign God works with a free-willed people that he created. When you get into it, and we're going to do this, but I'm saying as we continue in Kings, Chronicles, and we start getting into the prophets, this type of visual of free will is all over the place. All over the place. Now, can I have a moment with you? We're past our second hour. We're 30 minutes into our second hour. So, we do this. Look, if you have said this has been beneficial material, if you think this has been beneficial material, we say, help us, help you, help other people by sharing what does the Bible say with them. Whether we're answering sectarianism or whether we're just trying to promote godly principles and Christian character, we want to help people. And word of mouth is the best advertiser. They're getting broadcast Sunday night at 9, Wednesday night at 9, Thursday night at 8 p.m., broadcast at Wednesday morning 10 to noon, Thursdays 1 to 3, school broadcasts. This is a lot of information, and it's over 1,000 videos archived. And then you have quite a lot of it organized into these playlists. And then we say, if you email me at calebgrobertson@gmail.com, we'll put you on the informer list, page and a half Bible article every Sunday. And I'm saying, y'all, this is just me trying to give out beneficial material, several history lessons, perspectives, things of that nature. We just want people to be edified as much as they can. And I recognize that a lot of y'all are in congregations where you're not getting anything. You don't get good teaching. They don't give you a bulletin. You don't have anything. But you do have what does the Bible say. And we want you to be encouraged. If you're local, we say be checking out the newspaper, and this is going to be another tidbit that I'm fixing to go on. I don't want to be consumed with politics at all. I don't want to be a political figure. I'm a Christian. I want to work with people, and I want to bring them closer to God. And I had somebody say this to me, and I didn't disagree with them when they said it or before they said it. But it's what I said earlier. They basically said, our First Amendment rights get taken away. Freedom of speech and freedom to assemble. And so my tagline above this article that has to do, this is in the local newspaper on the internet, that has to do with the whole trucking scene in Canada. Preaching the gospel is expedited by freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is maintained by making effective argumentation. Christians can be in the discussion without being consumed by the discussion. And I believe that. And so I always try to have a biblical bent to my writings in the newspaper, and I do use current events as a jump-off piece. I try to promote history. This is going to have 1859, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. 1969, Vietnam protesters burn a Bank of America down in California. So I use current events, get in people's thinking, promote studying history, and then I promote the Bible. So here's my thing. People in the church, they want to talk about politics, and they want to talk about it with an uninformed opinion, and they want you to just suffer through it. I don't think that you have to be consumed with the political scene. I think we can participate in the discussions, but you need to do so in an informed fashion. And it's going to basically be hearing people that you don't agree with. And someone might say, well, I don't want to spend that much time in it. Look, I'm saying I don't want you to be consumed in it, but I do want to show you a moment about using your Old Testament study with your Kings and your Chronicles. This stuff is in there. You know what I'm saying? It is in the text, and some people would rather that I not bring it out. Look, and I'm telling you, I'm fixing to make just a tidbit for these people who act like Romans 13 is the extent of our discussion on working with a government system. So God did not put us in this world where we are in government systems, and God does not expect us to abide tyranny. In no sense, in any sense, is He expecting us to just abide tyranny. And then people go to Romans 13 and say, well, the laws of the land. Can I tell you that 1Kings 12 is your biblical mandate for standing up for your own rights? I had a member of the church tell me that George Washington was in sin because he revolted against England. That is absolute garbage. You have it in the text where the people came out and they said, we will serve you if things get lighter. And the old men in the text, they said to Rehoboam, this is a good call. You serve the people. Look, you have a president. He's not a one-man ruling system. And I know I'm not basically saying that everybody has to get an understanding of how Congress and Senate works and then the president. But you got to stop acting like that he just makes all the calls. And I'm saying you have these statements in history. That's William Buckley, and he's sitting there with Ron Paul. This is obviously an old video. But one of the things that Ron Paul brings up in his discussion with William Buckley is he said in the 1770s, when they basically were revolting against England, he said the tax rate was 2%. And they said, no, thank you. That is exactly what happened in Kings. And they were actually doing what God wanted to come about. God in 1 Kings 11 said, I'm going to split the kingdom. And then the people came in and they said, you're taxing us too hard. And the old men, who are basically the righteous folk in the scenario, they said, you are taxing them too hard. Stop acting like you just have to lay down and take everything the government gives you. And I know who these people are, and they're going to hear me say stuff like this, and they're going to say, no, Caleb's not looking at Romans 13. You're right. I'm looking at Kings and Chronicles. And I'm seeing what these people did, and I'm seeing the righteous statement of, you serve the people. They said we're not having a 2% tax rate. Now, 1 Kings 12:4, look at what they said. We will serve you if you fulfill this request, which is lighter taxation. This text is showing you that a society chooses who they will serve and to what extent they will serve them. Being in the government does not mean that they just get to create up these just arbitrary laws. Now, I understand someone says externalities where we're hurting third parties. If you're hurting third parties, you're hurting third parties. But even still, that is up for question. 1 Kings 12:7. The men said to Rehoboam, if you serve the people, they will serve you. They are your elected officials. Right? How is it they go about getting to be an elected official? They make you empty promises. And then you think, well, these sound like the empty promises that I could go for. I'll give them my vote. And then you don't get it. And what do? You complain at home. It's built into the fabric of your history. The young man who told me, he said, yeah, I think George Washington was in sin when he revolted against England. He said, Romans 13, he revolted against England. It is in our Constitution that we do not have to abide this. And in his first inaugural address, Abraham Lincoln said, whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it or their revolutionary right to dismember or overthrow it. It's in your governing document. Your past leaders have even said it's in your governing document, and ignorant brethren of the Old Testament say, well, you got to do whatever the law says. You got to do whatever the government says. And that's exactly why y'all haven't been to church in 2 years. 2020, 2022, there's a lot of people still are not assembling. Well, Romans 13. Those people ready to give up from the get-go anyway. Bunch of them looking for a reason not to come back anyway. What am I saying? Know your Bible, know your history, know your rights, and stand up for your rights. Thomas Jefferson says if a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so. Well, Romans 13 says you got to do whatever the law says. In one sense, he is the law. You know how many documents this man wrote for our country? And even he said, who wrote your document, said, when a law is unjust, you don't just get to obey it, you should disobey it. Henry David Thoreau. Now, what's the problem in first? This is an excursion. What's the problem in 1 Kings 12? Taxation. In his book, Civil Disobedience, he says, if 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would not be, he says, that would not be a violent and bloody measure as it would be to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood. Over 50% of the abortions that are performed in America are paid for by tax dollars, because over 50% of the women who go in to get abortions are actually getting government health care, and then the government pays for that abortion. And that's your tax dollars, while at the same time you say, well, we got to do everything they say Romans 13. Not only your tax dollars are paying for over 50% of the abortions, your tax dollars are paying the public school system that for years have been attacking God, the New Testament, theology, and I'm not even saying teach theology in the public school systems, but I'm saying stop acting as if evolutionary theory is the rock-solid foundation. And I don't even say this thing about got to pray in the public school system. I don't want some sectarian praying over the football game. Like, we got people dying and going to hell, and you think that God is concerned about this football game. Well, it's not the game, it's the kids. Y'all don't even pray for your kids when they're not playing ball. I'm just saying, do a better job educating yourself. It is okay to read religious books that are not the Bible. Obviously, at that point, you're going to find things that you're going to disagree with. But I'm saying, member of the church, Ed Harold Jr., he was the primary author of this textbook. It's a history textbook of America, Unto a Good Land. Foy Wallace, Sermon on the Mount in the Civil State. It's like 80 pages in the back of the Civil State, some of the best information you can read on the government. And it's got more than Romans 13 on there. Now, like I said, that was a tidbit. We're going back to Rehoboam. But look, that's in your text, y'all, and I'm not done. You go through your text, you are going to find these are government people operating at government levels. And if we did not have Kings and Chronicles, we would have no clue what a Christian's rights and opportunities are as we live in the world. Yeah, I don't think that God left us here with our hands tied. Now, look, this is God talking to people about the Bible. Now, I'm going to give you all this book, and it's going to have a lot of information. 2 Peter 1 says, all things that pertain to life and godliness. And y'all are going to be ruled by these governments, but I'm basically going to leave you with no clue on how to operate on them governments. The clue is in Kings and Chronicles, and the books are very, very ignored. Stop making your uninformed opinions an issue, and also stop letting these other people who make uninformed opinions a binding factor on these other people. Now, that's an excursion, but it's how you can use your text. I'm going to make another point. When we get to the queen, her name is Athaliah, right? There's stuff in here about information in the text on how to operate and maneuver inside of a civil state. It's very good information. That's why I said a whole class on political theory should be taught out of the Old Testament. Now, a case for Rehoboam. He didn't make the split. Solomon did. He taxed the people too hard. He did, in fact, bring in idol worship inside the nation of Israel. And I think that, I'm going to go that it's an accurate statement. The people said, you're too hard on us. And then Rehoboam says, my father beat y'all with whips. I think it's probably an accurate representation. Can I say this? That they're not mad at Rehoboam? They already knew who their next elected official would be. In the beginning of chapter 12, Rehoboam went to Shechem for Israel to make him king. And it came to pass when Jeroboam was the son of Nebat, who was in Egypt, heard of it, that they sent and called him. That's verse number 3. Israel had already brought Jeroboam home. They knew how this was going. This is not an issue with Rehoboam. There it is in verse number 3. They sent and they called Jeroboam. You need to come home. We're basically going to see how this works out. And y'all, I think that this is also another example of someone says, what is it? Revolting is not the same thing as anarchy. These people basically spoke up for themselves, and they said, this is what we want. But they did not then go to lawlessness. They said, we're going to make a new civil state. That's what they're going to do. We've got a new ruler ready to go, and they basically are saying if they call Jeroboam home and they think that they're wishes are going to be granted by Rehoboam, then Jeroboam, with his industrious self, just gets to go back to work. A man of Ephraim gets to go back to work. This is a peaceful moment. But that's usually how the people in power go. They don't like being tested. And the old men were fine with it. They said, give the people what they want. But they were already bringing Jeroboam home. This isn't a personal attack on Rehoboam. And then, this is my point also, Rehoboam is only 3 days into this. Like if someone said, okay, Caleb, you're painting out Rehoboam to be an okay guy. You're saying he inherited a bad situation, but he did not have to react the way that he did. And I'm saying I have operated with enough of y'all to know that y'all's temper is about this long. And for him to be 3 days in and already being questioned, we judge presidents, we say their first 100 days in office out of a 4-year term, first 100 days in office. He didn't even get a day into it. Right into the scene, they asked this, he says, give me 3 days. On the very first day of your coming into office, you wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like that. I probably would just be saying, fine, take it. That's how it's going to be. I'm on my first day, and you guys are already treating me this way for what the past administration did. Your father made our yoke grievous. Now make therefore the grievous service of thy father and his heavy yoke which he put upon us lighter. We will serve thee. This is a peaceful and reasonable request. And he said unto them, give me 3 days, and then come again to me. And the people departed. You would not have liked this. I would not have liked this. So, no. It's not the right call that he listens to bad advice, but I understand the frustration. And if we're being honest, you do too. Nobody likes being questioned. And I'm going to say this too. I don't take questioning from people who don't have a clue about what I do. And that's what I say. You might as well call NASA and tell them how to build a rocket than expect me to listen to people who have zero experience in what I do. I don't care what your opinion is. Then you say, yeah, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't either. But people still feel like they ought to give their opinion. I feel for this guy. And your first day in, doing you like this, but answering them in a hard way. I don't even know that he was going into basically having the throne thinking bad things. It very, very well could have been that he didn't know. Or we're going to see some more points. Someone's going to say, making a case for Rehoboam. Somebody's going to say, yeah, but Rehoboam had the book of Proverbs. He should have taken the throne with much more wisdom. And my answer to that is Christians today have the book of Proverbs and they don't read it. They could be acting with much wisdom out of the book of Proverbs, and they don't do that. So no, I'm not going to let anybody badmouth Rehoboam. A bunch of people who don't read the book of Proverbs say, well, Rehoboam ought to have been studying the Proverbs. Yeah, if everybody were. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Proverbs 1, verse number 8. This is a book written by Solomon to his son about a bunch of life's problems, life's quandaries. It is filled with good information about not chasing riches and finding a good woman, and then disciplining your kids. It is a good book, and you can read it every month. 1 chapter a day, you can read it every month. So these people say, yeah, well, he should have read the book of Proverbs. You should too, and that's Matthew 7. If you're going to condemn him for not studying Proverbs, you're basically pointing it right back at yourself. And here's the thing too, though, that he could have said, and this is a hard spot to be in. What if he did read the book of Proverbs? And what if Rehoboam is upset going into the throne situation and he says, yeah, my father wrote Proverbs, but my father didn't act out the book of Proverbs. Does it matter what other people are doing? No. Does it get into our way of thinking? Yes, it does. And so for myself, I don't want to be inconsistent lest somebody else use me as an excuse to basically justify their further inconsistencies. I want to be consistent. I want to have my doctrine tight. And I want to be a convicted person. Everybody in a congregation, they always look at, and this is why I say it's a good idea to not let the lukewarm people hang around. You know, someone says, what is it? It's 1 Thessalonians 5, it's either 12 or 14. It's 14. Warn them that are unruly. In Revelation chapter 3, being lukewarm was a punishable offense. He said in Revelation 3, you make me sick, I'm going to vomit you out. The real text says, I will spew you forth. I don't know why we would not warn the unruly. And we all know who the lukewarm are. And we all know that the people who are growing more towards lukewarm, they always use the official lukewarm as their standard. I don't know why I can't be that way. They get to be that way. They stay here. See, that's bad. And they ought to be warned instead of basically getting to set precedent in the congregation. But it's not good, but it gets in our thinking. Solomon, if it's the case that he wrote the book of Proverbs at an earlier date and he spent a long time not acting it out, well, then that's Matthew 23, 1 through 4. Jesus told them about the Pharisees, do what they say, but don't do like they do, because they say one thing and they do another. That's problematic. It shouldn't matter what other people do. We should just follow God's word. You know that, I know that. Now, someone says, well, Rehoboam ignored the old men. So I think I heard a brother of mine, and he said, if somebody asked me what I thought the biggest problem in the Lord's church was today, he said I would tell them it is the eldership, because more times than not they're unqualified. When he said it, I laughed, because just that he's willing to say it, and I think it's an astute observation. It's the truth. It's a rare thing to find a congregation that has educated teaching elders. More times than not, elders just hire out one man to do all of their teaching work. And then that man doesn't do evangelism because he's so busy doing the elder's job. And the elders are doing nothing. So someone says, well, Rehoboam ignored the old men and their good counsel. If you got qualified elders, a lot of people ignore them too. And you say, well, maybe we don't have elders. Okay, you got one man in the congregation who does a lot of work. And if he's an older individual and he loves you, and he's trying to give you some good advice, more times than not, you don't listen to that either. So I don't know why you came to this text just wanting to beat up on somebody for doing what you do. Hey man, we got this story amongst ourselves. This is basically how I know when he's being serious. One time, me and my friend, my classmate Drew, we were here, and I think we stayed late to do TV, and I wanted to drive 3 hours back to school at night rather than having to wake up early and drive the 3 hours back to school. And so we're getting ready to leave out of here at dark, and my dad says, I don't know if I would do that. And the idea is, what if you hit a deer? He says, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know that's a bad idea, if that's a good idea. And, he says all this stuff, and I said, yeah, but I don't want to wake up at whatever time to get over there 3 hours later. So we leave, and for people who are local, we didn't even make it to Stewart, and we're headed to Bristol. We did not even make it to Stewart. And I plowed right into a deer. And so I told my dad after I hit that deer, I said, man, I wish you would have been more emphatic. Don't go, you'll hit a deer. And so now when it's like a moment of, I need to know that you're really being emphatic, it's the idea of, if you go out here, you're going to hit a deer. Old people give you good advice and people don't listen to it. And I'll say this too about good advice. It's sometimes hard to know you're getting good advice. You don't just open up mail and somebody else has stamped, this is good advice. I know this is good advice, but I'm just going to ignore it. You find reasons to think that it's not good advice. So no, I'm not going to beat them up on that. And I want to say this too, being old doesn't mean you got it all put together. Proverbs 16:31 says, the hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. I do not care how old you are if you're not a Bible student. And it's like someone says, well, they got life experience. I already touched that earlier. They're still making bad choices. You just have a collection of bad choices under your belt. And if you didn't have the Bible, you're probably not learning from those life choices. So look, man, I've been traveling at different places, and you can be an elder in a congregation. That doesn't make you my elder. And just because you are older and you have been in the church for how many years, that just doesn't do anything if you are not actually a Bible student. What does hoary head mean? White-headed. American culture. Everybody that's, out there dyeing your hair, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's a sign, man. It's in the Bible. And you're saying you're seeing it right here. It's a sign. Other cultures respect it. My dad has said when he was younger, he said, I couldn't wait for my hair to turn gray. I got white hairs on the sides of my head. Love it. Someone says, well, you still don't know nothing. Well, maybe I'll get there. We'll see. Hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. You know, one thing they said about, let me just say this. Someone said, I didn't like that, Caleb. Well, let me just say this. I like Foy Wallace because of his writing material, but some people liked Foy Wallace, they said, because he had the prettiest white hair they ever seen. It looks good with some people, right? You can do it. These men have seen how fast a kingdom can turn on an individual. That's a note about the old men. This is where I say, if you don't have experience, I mean, you don't really have anything to offer. And I'm saying about a particular field of working with people. And can I say something about folk who climb a ladder? Some people get promoted because of nepotism. You being like plant manager doesn't always mean that you are able to do the job, but that's always like a thing that gets thought of when we start saying we're going to have elders. Okay, let's gather up all the managers in the congregation and make them elders. Doesn't mean they know how to work with people. I'm talking about people who are in it. They've got skin in the game. They love the people. They want the best outcome to come out, and they're concerned about you at the same time being concerned about the other people. These old men told Rehoboam, because the text says that these were folk who had served with David. Consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father. Okay, they served with Solomon. They had served with Solomon, but here is my point. They would have known about David. So in 1 Samuel 18:7, look, man, things can go south really quickly. Saul started eyeing David just like that. 2 Samuel 15:6, Absalom starts leading a revolt. It turned and went hard against him just like that. 1 Kings 1:38, Adonijah, he led a revolt. Joab ended up joining that revolt. It went quick. And so these old men say, look, this is not an unreasonable request. They want lighter taxes. It's not an unreasonable request. Give it to them. And he says, no, I'm not going to do it. They had experience, and most elders don't have experience. I can't do anything about it. Most elders don't have experience doing anything. In the kingdom, they've been in the church over 20 years. They held down a job, and then they just get put in the office. Remember them which have the rule over you, have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow. Man, considering the end of their conversation being their lifestyle, I have seen so many elders turn a blind eye to all the stuff their kids do and their grandkids do. They don't have any ounce of like courage and moral fiber in their backbone. I can't follow them. That's what I'm saying. These people had been in the office. They saw how it went. They loved the people because they said, serve the people. And they gave them good advice. But here's what he could have said that. Someone says he ignored the old men. Well, he could have said, you know, if my dad did not listen to you guys, why should I listen to you guys? Or maybe you're trying to tell me something different than you told my father, which now is making me wonder if I can trust you. See, that's what I'm saying. There's all kinds of things that could be in these scenarios, and it's just hard making a decision real time. Yeah, we can look back at it and say, here are all the factors lined up against him. But this, when I'm doing this, is basically how I will analyze other people's situations, and I just don't want to be too hard on them. You might. And I'm saying the people who want to be hard on Rehoboam and not actually give him his due. There are all manner of factors on here as to why. You know, there's a lot of people that will do you that way. And that's something that I said just the other day. You know, you can tell when people don't want to talk to you. And so my statement was, I said, you know, I don't know if he knew who I was and he didn't want to talk to me. And I said, or maybe he knew who my dad was and he doesn't like my dad. But either way, it was a rude interaction. You know, that could have been going on. Proverbs says, without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. And somebody says, well, he should have listened to the number of the old people. There could have been as many young people giving him counsel. And also, that is not like a hard, fast, concrete rule, because 10 out of the 12 spies in Numbers 13 came back with a bad report. Majority doesn't always be the deciding factor. If that were the case, then they should not have gone into the promised land, because 10 out of 12 said we can't do it. So I don't know what the number situation was, and I don't know. These were people that it says young men that grew up with him. I got a lot of young people who grew up with me. Doesn't mean I'm going to take advice off them. So, maybe he thought this was a better situation. We're going to talk about it more next time, but this is what I want to say as we are going out. I have to think this way because when I come to my New Testament and I see 1 John 2, 1 and 2, my little children, these things write unto you that you sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And he is the propitiation of our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. I'm telling you, me and you, we're talking, I'm not going to just abide by a bad situation that can only get worse. I'm going to say what I think the truth is. But at the end of the day, Jesus makes a case for you, because I think that is the exercise we have to go through in order to start working for each other, because I think that is how Jesus operates. I got to go. I'm out of time. 276-806-3641, calebgrobertson@gmail.com. Email me, Get on the Informer. We'll have more What Does the Bible Say live tonight at 9. We love you. God bless you. Keep asking what does the Bible say, and have a good rest of the day.